Everyone should be able to recognize that straight away. Hello, this is BJ from Hearns Hobbies, and today I've got a little bit of a treat. I'm going to be looking at an original vintage Tamiya rotor control car, and this is the one right here. Everyone should be able to recognize that straight away. This is an original Tamiya Super Shot from 1986, and it's been quite kindly lent to us from one of our customers, Paul. So he's had this particular car since it was released, so since 1986, and there's a few quite interesting period items here which I'll slowly go through and show you. The great thing about his car is he received it as a child, he's actually used it, enjoyed it, and it's still in this condition, which I think is pretty remarkable. It is missing a few bits and pieces, like the drive shaft's sort of missing out of there, but if we did want to get that replaced, it's still possible. We either get, say, a donor car, a second-hand donor car, and just take the parts off it, or you could get some of the newer parts as well and replace it with the re-released bits. But this particular car, it's not known as a Super Shot anymore. If you want to get a re-release version of this, it's called the Super Hotshot. So let's go through this original car and look at some of the differences. Okay, so let's start with the car first. Now, we also do have the original radio. So this is a Acoms Techni Plus radio. These were very common in packages that were available in Australia at the time. Also, it's on the 29 megahertz, which was only used in Australia. So crystals is another thing of the past. All right, but we'll have a closer look at this a bit later. All right, we also have a period charger as well, and then a period battery. All right, so let's just have a closer look. Pop it there. All right, so what is a Super Shot? Well, basically a Super Shot is the fully worked, fully optioned version of the Hotshot. Now, the Hotshot had basically the same componentry with additions. So the Hotshot was Tamiya's very first four-wheel drive off-road buggy. And I remember as a kid, it was the biggest thing to come out. You know, it's better than sliced bread. The particular car was amazing because it had independent suspension. Okay, it was fully double wishbone. Okay, you can see the movement here. And just that sort of engineering there just fully amazed me. Okay, the biggest differences you can see here are the shock absorbers. Okay, so the original Hotshot had a monoshock across the front, it was red. It also had a monoshock at the back, which used to live across here on top of the rear gearbox. But this has got the optional CVA shocks fitted. So if you had a Hotshot, you could get these as a separate set and convert it into a four-shock car. But with these, it comes complete with them. So of course, with the four shock, you've got the shock towers, which are additional. Same with the front. It's got these side-mounted shock absorbers mounts. The other addition is, you can see on the bottom here, it's got this full chassis skid plate. Okay, so it's screwed from the front of the chassis, attached to the back. You can see how much smoother that makes just the base of the chassis. Other big difference, of course, would be the motor. So the motor, it came with, it's a Techni Gold. Now the rear releases do come with a faster motor, but not this specific one. You see that it's got all the original bullet plugs. And then of course there's the huge metal antenna, which I don't think they include this anymore from memory. But this was so you can wind the really long antenna up to get reception. And that's what you had to do with all these crystal type radios. Because the other change would be the body was slightly different. You have the shape, and the wing was slightly different as well, and also the color scheme, of course. Okay, let's just take the body off and have a closer look inside. You're not going to see very much because it is a fully sealed monocoque. Just slide this off. Okay, so you can see has been painted on the inside. So this particular one's been brush painted. This is back in the day when polycarbonate paint was available in a tub, and You know, it's a lot easier to brush paint for a kid, but these days we understand it gives a lot better finish if you spray. So you can only get polycarbonate paint from Tamiya in a spray can now. So that's a bit retro. So stickers have already been attached. So even after all these years, they're starting to peel up, but it's generally in pretty good nick. Okay, and then these were polycarbonate at the time as well, so really flexy. All right, so this is what you see once you take the body off. You've got the full monocoque. You may be able to just see the size of the switch. That's an original switch. Underneath here would be the body of the switch, which was about so. So when you compare it to a micro switch of today, that is absolutely massive. And of course, with the insides, these had a mechanical speed controller. Okay, with a mechanical speed controller, they have these resistors. So again, with the Super Shot, this came with the square ceramic resistors. So there's one on this side and one on the other side. And on the Hotshot, it came with the round ones. And I think with the re-release, they actually give you some fake round resistors just to give the look. So idea behind these, so they used a bigger, chunkier white ones, and they were 2-piece, because in the day there were single-piece ones too with 3 tabs. You're using a very hot motor, and these are the resistors that burn off the power to reduce the speed. So if you can just imagine, if you want to go first speed, so if you imagine the speed controllers were 3-speed only. You had first speed, second speed, and you had full speed. Okay, and to achieve that, first speed would travel all the way through both resistors, and then, so that'll give you a third of the maximum speed, and then second speed was traveling through 1 resistor. So that'll give you 2/3 speed, and then full speed was no resistors at all. It was full battery power straight to the motor. Okay, so you can see the little thin wires here. They're all exiting and going to the resistors. So that's going to the speed controller. So the speed controller is hidden inside. It's operated by a servo. And the servo basically takes up quite a lot of room. Now, with the advent of electronic speed controllers, there's a lot more space to put inside. But with this particular one, you had to be really careful because it was very tight. And to get this all to marry up, because the top needs to marry up with the bottom. So basically you need to remove this bottom section to access all your radio equipment. You just had to make sure you didn't squeeze any wires, particularly around here, the power wires and battery wires. Okay, so that's pretty much the difference. Oh, one thing I should mention, obviously, the chromed gold wheels. That was a difference on the Super Shots as well. Okay, let's have a look at this battery. Now this is going to bring back some memories, because this one here, this is also a very typical Australian era battery. Let's see, you may not be able to see all the writing on here, but the label is indicating it's from Plessey components. So Plessey supplied a lot of batteries at the time in the Australian market, and this is a 1200 milliamp hour, 7.2 volt. So I'm not so sure what sort of cells I would have used. It could have been Saft cells from France or Sanyos from Japan. It's quite interesting. So it's described as a Speed Plus RC Junior type. Okay, there's a serial number and also a date of manufacture. So it's the 11th of 86. So this particular battery was born the same year as the car. So it's quite an early model. And 1200, I mean 1200 is pretty standard back then. Probably give you, with this sort of motor, maybe 5 minutes of driving time. And then of course with the battery, there's this period charger. Okay, so this particular slow charger is designed with the Australian plug in mind here. So this would have been locally acquired. Quite a long plug. Tamiya plug on the end. Now this charges at 0.18 of an amp. Okay, so you can imagine that'll be, what will that take? 8 hours, something like that, from flat. So that was part of the beauty of, oh, I don't know if it's a beauty, it was part of the charm of these cars. You basically spend all these hours building it, and then you wait practically a day or overnight to charge up a battery for 5 minutes of use. And I can guarantee you, when you're a kid at that time, that 5 minutes was the best 5 minutes you have of that day. And then take it home, clean it up. If you're lucky, you had extra batteries, and you just pop it in and keep going. But this was the type of culture that you had to live with these particular cars. This was a souped up car, so hence it didn't drive for very long, but it drove really fast while it was going. All right, so 1200 battery, it really brings back memories. Okay, let's have a closer look at the radio now. All right, a classic Acoms Techni Plus. Okay, so at the time you would have either had one of these radios in Australia, or possibly a Futaba type radio, or even a Sanwa radio. So Sanwa had their dash, there was this Techni Plus. Quite often the Techni Plus was bundled into the box. So it was shrink wrapped, and you'll see this, it was on the side of the box with this big A4 description of a package. And you could get them anywhere. You'd see them in Myers department store, you see them at Target, Big W, all those sort of places had these packages available. And that just shows how popular the cars were at the time. Okay, so the big things that are different are crystal. Okay, so I don't know if a lot of the youngins would know what a crystal is, but basically you pull this out, and it does have basically a quartz crystal inside, and these would vibrate when there's power attached to them at a particular frequency. And you'll have a matching crystal, which is inside the receiver inside the car, and then it would know where the signal's coming from, and then it'll react to whatever it's been told to do. Now the biggest problem was that there was only a certain number of channels available, and if you had someone else with the same channel, then you'll get interference, and suddenly you'll find your car driving off elsewhere. So hence the current 2.4 gig, where it always changes its ID, that is actually a godsend, which a lot of people were taking for granted and didn't really realize the evolution of the radio control. And if you ever went racing, the crystal was really important, because every single race meet you go to, if it was up to your time, you had to actually show you had the correct frequency in place, or the race couldn't start, because basically you've got two cars which are fighting against each other. And that's where the frequency board came about, but I think that's a different story. So with this, obviously with crystal, you've got this huge antenna. So this one's a little bit damaged, it's lost its tip, but even so, this will give you an indication of how long this thing is. Okay, I guess from the top camera you can't really tell. I mean, even the frontal camera, you get a basic idea of how long this is. It's got to be a meter at least. And if you can imagine at a racetrack, and you've got all these people hanging out with these sort of things around everywhere, it's almost like having a sword fight, or like lightsabers going at each other. And then of course you have to remember to put the aerial back from the bottom first, as I'm doing here. See how I'm extending it? Because if you grabbed it from the very top and you pulled it down, there's a good chance you're going to bend it and you break it. So you just have to be really careful and pull it down from this point like this. All right, and there's a radio. Acoms Techni Plus. Amazing. This one's actually made in Japan. So Asahi Communications is actually part of the, what was it? The Casio group. There you go. All right, so there you go. I hope you enjoyed this little, I guess, walk around of the Tamiya Super Shot, an original Super Shot. This one's owned by our good customer, Paul. And he's had this since a child, so there you go. So a little story about this one, he actually walked into the shop one day and said he wanted to get this going and give it to his son, and we said, basically, shouldn't do it. It's too much of a good thing. There's too much history in that. So it's kind enough to let us put it on display here. So unfortunately not many people can see them now because we can't let anyone in, but hopefully with the video you'll be able to get a closer look at it. And there you go from the overhead. How nice and original period car really is. So thank you very much for joining me here. If you have any comments, or you got little stories to tell me about your own childhood experience with an original Tamiya car, please put them in the comments. So thank you very much.